if we're going to talk about hashtag ending racism, we need to start by first of all putting pressures into countries to take full responsibility and full accountability when it comes to racism, because we cannot end racism if there's still countries like Sweden that is still allowing people to work in their system that are racist, still encouraging racism, still making racism feel like being a racist is not a problem, or your racist behavior towards people is okay. Because we need to understand something. You cannot fight something that you don't have a plan against. You cannot end something that you don't have a strategy to end it. Because you first of all need to understand, if we're going to end racism, we first of all need to understand how racism works and how it's going on and how to end it. Then we need to put pressure on countries, especially white countries. We need to pressurize them to start taking full accountability and full responsibility when it comes to racism. And what I mean by that is, hey guys, welcome back to Analysis with Janet. Here we talk about everything. Feel free to share your thoughts, your opinion in whatever thing you're talking about, but always remember to be polite and respectful as you share your thoughts and opinion. So today we're going to be talking about countries taking more responsibility when it comes to racism. Yes, we have always talked about how hashtag end racism, but then how do we come to the point of ending racism? And the reason why I'm making this video is because I live here in Sweden, and if you know one thing about Sweden is that they've always had this narrative where there is no racism in Sweden because you don't hear people talk about. But what people really don't understand is that the racism here in Sweden is being done more inside the system. So most racists are comfortably working inside the Swedish system, which makes it difficult for it to be told, because when a racist is now inside the system, then the victim has nowhere to turn to, because when you've been racial upon, you go to the system. But then where do you turn to if the system is the one that's employed the racist? Where do you turn to? You have nowhere to turn to. So at the end of the day, it makes it seem like, oh, there is no racism in Sweden, because if there was racism in Sweden, oh, we would have known because the system would have been talking about it. But the truth is that the system doesn't talk about it. And I've made so many videos about it. And if you want to understand more about how racism is in the Swedish system, you can follow my Facebook stroke Instagram account called My Autism Journey in Sweden, where I've been documenting and narrating a lot about my autistic brother. And also you can watch my YouTube stroke Facebook videos that I've made talking about different forms of racism here in Sweden. I think I've made almost like 4 or 5 different videos talking about the different forms of racism here in Sweden and how racism is affecting a lot of people here in Sweden and how racism works here in Sweden. And that's why I'm making this video today, to talk about why a lot of countries need to start taking full responsibility when it comes down to racism. I've seen cases, I've witnessed cases, I have even documented, which you can follow in my page called My Autism Journey in Sweden, where I've been documenting a lot about my autistic brother, videos, evidence of proof of racist people here in Sweden, and still, yeah, those people go to work every day, and I'm like, how is that even possible? How is that possible that a racist can still go to work every day after what that racist has done or what that racist is doing at work? And that's why I say this, that if we're going to talk about hashtag ending racism, we need to start by first of all putting pressures into countries to take full responsibility and full accountability when it comes to racism, because we cannot end racism if there's still countries like Sweden that is still allowing people to work in their system that are racist, still encouraging racism, still making racism feel like being a racist is not a problem, or your racist behavior towards people is okay. If we're going to talk about ending racism, we need to first of all start by putting pressure to a lot of countries to start taking responsibilities, because if countries are not willing to take responsibilities of accepting or acknowledging or plucking out their racists, then let's be honest to ourselves, we cannot end racism. We're not going to end racism, because the truth is that a lot of a lot of the racism that is existing today, a lot of people that have been racial upon today, if you look at those cases, somehow it's linked back to the system, somehow it's from the system, somehow the racist is working in the system, somehow the racist has been inside the system, which means that if countries were taking more responsibility and doing more work into fighting racism, maybe that individual will not be in the system, and that individual will not have killed that black person, or would not have attacked that black person, or would not have done what that individual did to that black person or that person of color. So if we're going to talk or fight against racism, we need to start putting more pressures into countries to take full responsibility and full accountability when it comes to racism. Because I'll tell you something, I've been advocating a lot about racism here in Sweden. If you're somebody that has been following my page or following my YouTube channel, or you've been following me, you know that I talk a lot about the different forms of racism here in Sweden and how racism is affecting a lot of black people and a lot of people here in Sweden. I've been doing a lot of videos and a lot of talk, and even linking you to some of my pages that I've been documenting most racists that are in Sweden. And still, yeah, the Swedish government hasn't plucked out those people. Then you ask yourself, so how are we going to fight racism in Sweden if the Swedish system itself is the one employing racists and empowering the racists? So how are we going to fight that? Because That's the one thing that I've been asking the Swedish government. You go out there and tell the whole how you're fighting against racism, but you're not plucking out your racists. And even when the evidence are piling and they're put in front of you, you still choose to ignore it. You still choose to not to go into investigating or stopping the racism. So you're not fighting racism, because we need to understand something. You cannot fight something that you don't have a plan against. You cannot end something that you don't have a strategy to end it. Because you first of all need to understand, if we're going to end racism, we first of all need to understand how racism works and how it's going on and how to end it. And if you look, like I've been saying in this video, a lot of the racial cases that we're seeing today, it has to do with people working in the system. We often say this, we're working towards ending racism, but if we are going to do that, if we really are working towards ending racism, and we really want to end racism, and we're really into that whole thing of like, we want to put an end to racism, we're tired of racism, we're tired of people being racial upon based on their skin color, then we need to put pressure on countries, especially white countries. We need to pressurize them to start taking full accountability and full responsibility when it comes to racism. And what I mean by that is plucking out the racists. And when a case is presented in front of you that someone is a racist, you should do your possible best immediately to remove that person. Because a lot of times we've seen where you've brought a case of a person being a racist and you see how much the government is reluctant into plucking out that racist. Yes, we have seen cases. Black people have to go on the street to protest. Black people have to spend days out there protesting and writing and signing petitions just to remove a racist in a system where there's evidence piling and showing that that person is a racist. No, it's wrong. Like literally, it's wrong. If there's a case, if there's an evidence showing that someone is a racist, as a country, as a system, you should immediately remove that person. Because how many more people would that individual hurt before you're going to remove that individual as a racist? How many more? I've been documenting my brother for almost 2.5 years now, talking about a medical doctor malpractice on him, and guess what? She still has a job and she's still continuing the malpractice, and I'm still documenting it, and the documentary is still going on, and she's still continuing her racist, and her racist act towards my brother, and I keep asking myself, how many more people will she racial like that? Is there specific number? Because I've been asking this. It's because if you have listened to the videos and the recordings that I've made about my brother, which you can go and listen to them on his Facebook Instagram account, which I asked that is there a specific number that woman has to get to before the Swedish government will pluck out and say, you know what, you are not a doctor, you are malpracticing. You cannot be punishing your disabled patient for being a disabled patient because of his skin color. But that's what a medical doctor is doing in Sweden, and she still has a job, and she's not the only one. There are a lot of races. When you get into the Swedish system, you realize that there are a lot of races that are working comfortably in the Swedish system. And then you have them talking about hashtag ending racism. I'm like, no, we cannot end racism if we cannot even pluck out the racists. Because how do you end something that you're still hiding the perpetrator? You're still hiding the bad guy. You're still hiding the abuser. If we want to end something, we need to first of all start by plucking out the people that are the problem to that thing. If we want to end racism, we need to start by first of all plucking out the racists. And that has to do with us putting more pressure into countries to take full responsibility and accountability when it comes to racism. The more it's going to be easier for us to end racism. So if we don't put more pressures into countries to take full responsibility and accountability when it comes to racism, it's going to be very difficult for us to end racism. Because the racists today, they're in the system. And so we need to pressurize the government to put laws, policies in places to stop the racists. And because if the government doesn't put those laws and policies in places to stop the racists, how are we going to end racism? If the government is not willing to pluck out racists, if the government is so reluctant when it comes down to racists, we have seen so many cases on the media, so many cases where you have to see how black people are going on the streets every day to protest just to move one racist in the system. And the bad thing is that most often that racist has killed a person. And the bad thing is that we can't even bring that person back to life. And all we are asking is just remove that person so that person doesn't kill another human being. Then it's like taking forever to get rid of that person in the system. So how many more people would that individual kill before it's been plucked out of the system? How many more people would that individual be racist towards before that individual has been plucked out? And that's why I say this. A lot of us black people, a lot of us people of color, today, if we're going to fight about any racism, we need to start putting pressures on countries to take more responsibility and more accountability when it comes to racism. Because let me tell you something, the more countries work more into putting laws and policies and becoming more strict when it comes down to racism, that's how we're going to be able to fight racism. But the more countries are being reluctant, being less helpful, and doing little or nothing to pluck out racists, it's going to be very difficult for us to end the racists. Because I tell you something, ending racism, it starts with the system of that country. It starts with the system of the country. How much laws, how much policies, how much have you put in place to make sure that a racist doesn't get away with his or a racist act? How much have you put in place to make sure that you will not tolerate a racist thinking that it's okay for a person to be a racist? Because that's what we need to start asking most countries. How much? Show us how much work you've put in place. Because if you cannot show us your work that you've put in place, then you're not willing to fight racism. Because we cannot fight racism by saying hashtag end racism. We need to fight racism by putting more pressure into countries to take more responsibility and accountability when it comes to racism. And that is something that we need to do more now if we have to fight or end racism like we say. Because the truth is this, ending racism, fighting racism, it starts with the system. And whether we acknowledge it and whether we accept it or not. But that's the truth. Because racism started with the system. Yes, racism started with the system, and we can only end it if we go back to the system. And that's why I say we have to put more pressure into countries to take full responsibility and full accountability when it comes to racism. All for watching. Thank you all for listening. I hope to see you guys again in my next video. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Don't forget to like come and follow me on my Facebook stroke Instagram account called Analysis with Janet. And guys, remember, as you share your thoughts and your opinion, always remember to be polite as you do that. Like I said, I hope to see you guys again in my next video. Bye guys.